Today I'm going to be sharing my full portfolio breakdown. This is exactly how I am positioned with my long-term portfolio as of right now at the time of recording at the end of June 2024. Now, before we get into the portfolio itself, there are a few things that we have to keep in mind. The first thing, of course, is that the market isn't looking too hot right now, so a lot of these positions have changed recently. This portfolio will change on a regular basis. It could be due to me maybe changing, adding, removing coins from a portfolio, but it also can be due to the market. So if a coin makes up a certain percentage of this portfolio and then it pumps or it dumps, that of course is going to play a part and impact the portfolio. So that's just one thing you need to keep in mind, but there are a few more. And another very important thing to know is what works for me may not work for you. So your risk tolerance may be different to mine. Maybe you're heavier in altcoins than me. It will change from person to person, and there is no one size fits all. So it's very important to keep this in mind because it is not about just copying what I have in my portfolio. I don't have a crystal ball. I just do what I am comfortable with. I have the altcoin exposure that I'm comfortable with, and my portfolio may just be in a very different situation. Maybe you're looking for a 50x overall this cycle. Maybe I'm looking for a 5x. All of these things are going to play a part in how people's portfolios shape up. So now we'll get into the portfolio, and I have 3 core positions that make up 50% of this portfolio. It's not too exciting, but it is just what I am comfortable with. First of all is Bitcoin. This makes up for 20% of my portfolio. And although it isn't going to provide me with the 100x returns, if we look at the state of Bitcoin compared to altcoins recently, it has worked out pretty well. Next up with 20% again is Ethereum. Probably no surprises, and maybe it has underperformed a little bit, but I'm not willing to reduce this exposure with ETFs almost ready to come into play. So they make up 40%, and I actually hold a lot of Bitcoin and Ethereum that I actually had throughout the whole of the bear market from last cycle, and I just kept holding and adding. Now, this doesn't mean that I didn't sell any Bitcoin or any Ethereum last time around in 2021, because I definitely did, but I just ensured that I didn't sell everything. I always want to have some exposure, even if it's a small amount, to crypto. I've never personally been 100% in stables because I accept the fact that I could be wrong. Whether it's a bear market, a bull market, and so on, I just want to make sure that I always have exposure. And the third coin that makes up for 10% of this core position for the overall 50% is Solana. Now, fun fact, I actually bought Solana at around $8.50 way back. I fumbled the bag. I sold at around $13 for some nice quick profit, and then jumped back in at around $18 to $19. Now, of course, when I actually bought this, it was a smaller amount of the portfolio, generally speaking, but with the strength that we've seen over the last 6 to 9 months with Solana, it has become a much larger position. I haven't sold any since then, and I don't plan to do so anytime soon because, as you'll have seen in the recent Solana price prediction video, I do think there is still plenty of upside. So we've covered the core positions that makes up for 50% of the portfolio, and this is where it gets interesting. This is where we start to cover the altcoins, the higher risk plays. Now, first on that list is Kendu. Now, many people may not have heard of this, but it is a meme coin, a dog coin, and it makes up for 8% of my portfolio right now. You may be wondering why, and it's a good question. Well, to be honest, I actually bought this months and months back. I put a small amount in, and quite recently it has just gone crazy. This has just ran up and all of a sudden became 8% of my overall portfolio. Now, the thing is, I actually have de-risks. I've took 10x of my initial investment right now. So if it goes to 0 tomorrow, I know that I've took a 10x and I've realized some profit, and overall it hasn't been a bad trade, although of course it could have been better in hindsight. But right now I'm actually not taking any more profit. I'm going to leave it as a huge position in this portfolio. I look at the size of the market cap, I look at the community strength, and this is kind of my moon or bust bag. Because when you've spent a lot of time with Mr. Backwards, who is, the king of memes, the king of Pepe, you start to realize that all it takes is that one bag with conviction that can help you truly make it. But it's absolutely important that you understand the risks. You understand that it can go to zero, and if it does, you know, you have to accept that. So that's kind of where I am with this bag of Kendu right now. Next up on the list is actually quite a boring position. It is USDT, otherwise known as Tether. Now this makes up for 5% of the portfolio right now, and the only reason it's there is because quite recently I've been shaving profits off positions, Kendu included, and that's why it is still in the portfolio. However, over the next couple of weeks I do plan to deploy this, either adding to positions that I currently have or adding new positions. Now we have two coins that make up for 4% of the portfolio each, so 8% total. And this is Fetch and also AIOZ. Two AI players, two big players that have run hard recently, and it's important to note that I actually did buy these at way cheaper prices very early in this year, watched them run, continued to bag hold them, and now I still have them whilst sitting at much lower prices than where they have been recently. Am I too concerned about this? Not really. Of course, it would have been nice to realize some more profit on these positions and buy back lower, but that's very easy to say in hindsight. Overall, I still have a lot of conviction in the AI sector and also these two as two of the blue chip players in that narrative, that sector, that category. So of course you've got Fetch, which will be going under the ASI merger in a couple of weeks. That's something that I've got to consider with this position. And also I have AIOZ, which isn't just AI, it is also a deep in play, and it is something that I'm very comfortable continuing to hold. And if you are enjoying this video, if you want to see more portfolio updates, let me know in the comments. Also like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm happy to do these on a more regular basis when there's any, significant changes in the portfolio, but only if you guys want to see it. So next up on the list, we have 5 positions that are worth 2% each, making up for 10% of the overall portfolio. Now 2% does sound pretty small, but in relevance to this portfolio, when you take out those core positions we mentioned at the beginning, when you look at 10% overall, they are still pretty significant and pretty relevant to the portfolio structure. So first of all, two that go hand in hand, we have TokenFi and we have FlowKit. Now, of course, I am relatively biased. I've partnered with them, I've worked with them over a period of time now, but I do believe that there is potential for these to go higher than where they are now, and that is why I will continue to hold them. Two hot narratives in meme coins and RWA, and they know how to get marketing right, so I'm very comfortable with those positions. Also on the list we have DEAI, which is 01. This is something that I invested into the seed round, and to be honest, it is a project that I have a lot of conviction in. Again, in that AI sector that I continue to increase my exposure to, as again, I am bullish on that narrative. Then we also have the likes of Radix, which is a portfolio project that has actually been in there for a number of years. I've worked alongside the Radix team for I think just over 3 years now. A really solid team, a ecosystem that is starting to really kick on now and thrive. So that is a project, a layer 1 project that I'm feeling very comfortable with. And lastly in this 10% is Trump. Now I only added this just last week when we seen all of the drama. There was a little bit of risk associated to this because of course there was the DJT token that maybe could have become the official Trump token and wiped this one out, but I seen the discount, I thought it was worth the risk, and so far it's playing out quite nicely. Now it goes without saying that I plan to hold this one going into November and those US elections. And then following on from this, we have a bunch of coins that are basically worth 1% each. First on that list is WinR or Winner. This is my GambleFi exposure and it is on the ARB chain. I actually lack Arbitrum exposure, but looking at the metrics, looking at the size of this L2, I definitely feel comfortable keeping WinR in there. We also have Celestia or TIA. Now this was originally worth way more than the 1% that it is now, but unfortunately price has nuked. I was one of those guys who was holding for airdrops. Hasn't worked out too great, but at the current prices, I feel like we're much closer to a bottom than we are a top. and that's why I will continue to hold. And we have SmartDex or SDEX. This is a play that I actually purchased around 1 year ago, so the overall position is still looking very healthy from those initial buys, and I do believe it is a very promising decentralized exchange. We also have RST, which is Rainy Studios, of course, Icebags project. This is me getting exposure to the Beam ecosystem. It's also one of the only Web3 gaming projects that I have in the portfolio. A few more projects that I hold and am currently staking are also the likes of Pipe Network, Wormhole, and Manta. These, of course, are all worth around 1% of the portfolio, currently being staked either for genuine good returns or to land other airdrops. And another one in the mix here is NGL, otherwise known as Entangle, and this is a little bit of a different one for me. The reason for this is because I actually invested in the seed round of Entangle way over 1 year ago when nobody else was paying attention during those end stages of the bear market. Now, the situation I have here is that Entangle is currently worth around 1% of my liquid portfolio. What I have in vested tokens is much larger, but I will not receive all of them for at least another 2 years. So it's very difficult to put that into the portfolio when it isn't liquid, when it can't be sold, because as I've learned many times in the past, unless those tokens are accessible and they can be sold tomorrow, they're actually not worth much because, you know, prices are so volatile and it can be very difficult to judge. Now, the one thing I am comfortable with here, of course, is holding Entangle for that long. I think it's a very solid project, one of the big players in the omni-chain space, and is something that I can just sit back, relax, and let those tokens come when they do. I also still hold Injective, because I do think that the ecosystem there still has a lot more to give and there is room for upside. I have Doge in there, of course. What would a portfolio be without a little bit of Doge, keeping the OG meme coin in the mix? And I also have Zeus Network. Now, this is some of my only BRC20 exposure, and on top of that, it does have that cross-chain compatibility with the Solana network, so tapping into two very interesting ecosystems there. Now, this one, to note, is part of a seed investment that I made a few months back. And lastly, to finish off the 1% club, we have 3 more projects in that AI sector. So again, increasing my exposure there, we have NAI, we have AIT, and we have TARS with the ticker TAI. Now, these 3 projects are 3 that have been hit pretty hard recently. I mean, let's be serious, all altcoins, or 99% of altcoins, have took a beating recently. These are no exception, and I do think fundamentally they're worth keeping hold of just to see if they can stage the comeback that they deserve. And if you've been tallying up the total percentage as we've gone through the video, you'll know at this point we're at around 95%. So there is currently 5% left of this portfolio. And to be honest, this is just a mix of different bags. It's bags that have been airdropped, it's bags that were way bigger that are now basically worth much less. There are bags that are just basically dust at this point. So I'm not going to include them in the video because they're not significant. If anything, it's just a showing that I am quite lazy and I really do need to tidy up this portfolio, maybe just sell a few things and just get it more concise and, you know, tidied up. So that is the situation with the final 5%. We won't be covering that today. This also doesn't cover any NFTs that I hold. I have Kampai Pandas, Sappy Seals, Pudgy Penguins and so on, but I don't really include them in my crypto portfolio per se. So that pretty much wraps up the video. It wraps up the portfolio. One thing to keep in mind here is if there are any coins that I've talked about on Twitter, on Telegram, and they're not included in this video, they could be part of the final 5% as we've just discussed, but they also could have just been trades. Now, I do a lot of trading. I have 2 separate portfolios. I have my long-term investments, which we've just covered, and I also have a stack on Blowfin, which I actively trade with. Any of these coins that I trade, I'm purely looking at technical analysis. I'm looking for quick gains rather than an investment. So do keep that in mind. It is important to keep it into perspective. If you did enjoy the video, do drop a like, do subscribe. Let me know what your portfolio is looking like. I'm really interested to see what other people are holding out there, if they're adding, selling, and so on. But in the meantime, please do trade safe. Please do invest safe. Don't just blindly copy this portfolio. and I'll catch you in the next one.